Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another tutorial on mixing and recording rap and hip hop in Pro Tools. I am producer, mixer, and engineer Nick Battistone, and today I'm going to answer some questions I received on a previous tutorial on creating session templates in Pro Tools. I received a lot of emails, some YouTube comments and questions and such regarding additional things that you can do with session templates. The biggest question that I got was, can you use plugins and import those plugins and settings into your new sessions via a session template? And the answer to that question is yes. Anything that you do, whether it be signal routing, plugins, etc., will all be able to transfer into any sessions you use with your session templates. Now, I will go ahead and create a session for you today and apply some plugins, and then we'll open up a blank session and import that data just so I can show you that it works. The added bonus to that is I'm going to go ahead and use some plugins and dial in some settings that I commonly use on my sessions, so you guys can maybe get an idea or see some new plugins in operation, or maybe get some new ideas on some settings to use. Now, two quick things that I'm going to mention. The first being this: if you're using the same plugins in the same settings on every session, you're really holding yourself back. Try to make sure that you're not limiting your creativity or your experimentation. Every song is different, every artist is different, everything has its unique sound and its unique feel. So don't just go for your, go-to plugin with your go-to setting, throw it on and call it a day. I know that even some of the great mixers use, their favorite reverb setting on a lot of hip hop vocals or their favorite delay, and that's cool, but just don't forget to experiment. Go ahead and start off with your favorite plugins and settings dialed in, but then, bypass that plugin, throw a new one on, and play around. See what works best. I guarantee you'll surprise yourself, and that'll lead to much better mixes. So that's that. The second thing I'm going to say is this. If you're finding that when you're importing your session templates into sessions, and, at the beginning of each session, or you're working with a specific artist, and you're finding that you're spending 20 or 30 minutes changing all of your settings from your session template to get it to fit that session or that artist or that album, whatever it is you're doing, create a new template. The purpose of these session templates is to save you time and to speed up your workflow. If you're finding that you're spending a half an hour changing all of your settings from your template, then chances are you need a new template. So, I have 15 or 20 session templates at least on my main mix system. And that's because, I have 5 or 6 different ones for hip hop, for R&B, for rock, for metal, whatever it is I'm working on. And each one of them is pretty much very drastically different. Not just in the plugins and effects that I use, but in the way that I route the signal, the types of tracks that I use, all of that. So, make sure that if you're, doing something that's completely different from your template, create a new template. It only takes a couple of minutes to do. I showed you that with my previous tutorial. And what are they? A few kilobytes in size? Really? They're not like they're taking up hard drive space. So, make your workflow simple, make your workflow easy, create templates for stuff that you actually do and that you actually use. So, don't waste time changing settings on one session template. Okay, so that's my rant on that. Okay, so here we are in the session. Now, I'm going to show you the only two things that are different from this session template than the one that we created in the previous tutorial is this: the inclusion of an effects group bus and my use of a 2-bus before the master fader. Now, I'm going to go ahead and explain both of those very quickly to you. Now, just like we do with audio, whether it be vocals or music, I've routed all of the outputs from all of my effects sends through this EFX5 bus to the input of this new aux track, a stereo aux track that I've labeled effects, and I've set the input to that EFX5, and that's outputting to my master bus or my 2-bus. Now what this does is it groups all of the outputs from all of these effects into one group bus, the same as with how we've done with audio, vocals, and music. Now there's a couple of benefits to doing that. The first is, say you're working on a vocal. You're trying to EQ it, you're trying to, pull out some problem frequencies, whatever. You have some reverbs and some delays applied, as opposed to having to go through and mute those sends, or to have to come down here to your effects tracks and mute the the aux tracks themselves. You can just go ahead to this group bus, hit mute, and now all of your effects are muted and you're listening to your vocal completely dry. So it's a very quick way to bypass all of your effects and hear your source signal completely dry. Now, the next benefit is, and this is also particular for you guys that are mixing in, less than perfect monitoring environments. Sometimes you'll add reverbs and delays and effects, and you'll take your mix out, listen to it in your car, your friend's stereo, on your iPod, whatever, and you'll realize, damn, this reverb is just drenching my vocal, or this delay is cluttering my mix, or that effect is way too overpowering. Whatever the case may be, you have to come back to your session and fix it. Now, if you've done a lot of balancing with changing the volumes and such with your effects tracks, it's kind of one of those things where you might have a very delicate balance build up, and you like the way that it's balanced, it's just too loud. So you just need to turn the overall volume of all of your effects down. Well, as opposed to having to, come through and change your balance and try and rebuild it and rebalance it and everything, you can just come right to this effects group bus, grab the volume fader, pull it down. Quick and easy. It's pulled all of your effects outputs down in unison. So now you're able to pull those effects down without changing the delicate balance of your mix. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, now the other benefit, excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't know why my throat's so dry today. Now the other benefit is, especially when you're, applying effects to vocals, you might have a few reverbs going on, some delays, some effects, some phasers, whatever the case may be. You've got a lot of stuff going on in your mix. Well, you might realize after listening to it that because of the effects, your vocal is fighting for space. It's getting buried in reverb and cluttered with delay, and, it's just fighting for space. So one thing you could do is go to your effects group bus, go to your inserts, and go ahead and drop in your favorite EQ. Now, you can EQ all of the effects at once and start pulling out some space to give the vocal some room. So now your vocal no longer has to fight for space with your effects. And you could do it all by processing just one group bus as opposed to having to go through and EQ out all of these reverbs and delays. Now, of course, when you're setting up your reverbs and delays, you should always EQ and dial in the best settings for the mix, clearly. But, obviously we might get really far into the mix before we realize it's a problem. So this might be one quick solution to that problem. Okay, now the next thing that's different is the 2-bus. And that's something that I may have mentioned before in a previous tutorial, I cannot remember, but it's a very quick and simple thing. As opposed to routing the outputs from my tracks to the master fader, which if you work with group buses like I do, the only tracks that should be going to your master fader would be your vocal group bus, your music group bus, and your now created effects bus. Those are the only things that should be going to the master if you're working with groups. Well, as opposed to outputting those directly to the master fader, I output those through a bus that I've labeled the 2-bus, and that 2-bus goes to the input of another new stereo aux track that I've labeled 2-bus, and then that bus goes to the master fader. So essentially, this is a group bus for the entire track, or if you want to look at it this way, it's a group bus for your group buses. So now all of your group buses are outputting to this, and this now, excuse me, this 2-bus now goes to your master fader. Now, what's the purpose of this? It's simple. There's a lot of ways that people mix, and people have different philosophies, but the best and easiest practical use of this is if you want to print stems within your mix without actually having to go through the Pro Tools bounce, you can just simply output this 2-bus as opposed to going to the master fader. You can output from here to another bus within your session. Scroll down here, I'll choose group 5. Now I can create one new stereo audio track and set the input of that stereo audio track to group 5, and then click record on that stereo audio track, and then I can bounce stems. So whether it's music, a group of vocals, or the whole mix, whatever it is, you can bounce that right within your session. Now the benefit of doing that is this. You can apply all of your bus processing, what you would do to your stereo master fader. You can apply those effects to this 2-bus, and then those effects will be applied to the tracks that you bounce, or your stems, whatever. Or you can still continue to apply all of those all of those effects and processes to the master fader, and then when you bounce stems through your 2-bus, they're bounced dry. So that way, if you're bouncing stems that you're going to use in your session, then you'll want to bounce those dry without effects. So that way, it's not getting compressed by your master fader, your master bus compression, and then coming back in your session and then getting compressed by your master bus compressor again. So it's kind of eliminating you processing the master twice. So now you can print stems dry within your session, use them, and then, not have to worry about applying your master bus compression and effects twice. So that's the real added benefit of doing that. But again, everybody has their own way of working. It might be something you find useful. It might not. Again, it's entirely up to you. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right into applying some effects in some plugins to this mix. As you can see, I have 3 vocals for the verse, 3 vocals for the hook, and 2 ad-libs. This is just for one artist. So I have my main verse vocal for that artist, and then I have his dubs. I have 2 dubs, one left, hard panned, one right, hard panned 100%, and the same thing for the hook. Then I also have 2 ad-libs that, depending on the session, I might pan them hard left and right, I might bring them in 50, 60%, just depends on the mix. But, standard, audio tracks for any good hip-hop recording session template. Now, of course, those are all routed to this vocal bus, so let's go ahead and start applying plugins. Now, when it comes to bus processing, when I'm recording, I don't apply pretty much anything to my buses, whether it's music, effects, or vocals. That's something I save for the mix process. Now, when it comes to mix, I usually apply a bus compressor to the vocals and music pretty early on, and I mix through it. But when it comes to recording, I don't, because I don't want anything affecting the signal that I hear. When I'm hearing my raw signal coming in through Pro Tools, I want to hear it raw. Now, of course, I usually have a preamp or a compressor or some other external hardware on the front end, so I don't want to hear a bus compressor when I'm trying to listen to what the compressor, my external hardware compressor is doing, because I might be hearing compression from my bus compressor that's throwing off what I'm interpreting from my hardware. So generally speaking, I leave these dry except for a little bit of console emulation, because that's something that's only going to color the sound, and it's not something that's going to change the dynamics of the audio. So I will go ahead and apply that right off the bat. And for that, I use the Waves NLS channel. It's under the harmonic. This is an incredible console emulation that emulates 3 different consoles. For hip-hop, I generally use the Spike or the Nevo settings. Now what I'll do is I'll just drive it a little bit. For the vocals, I usually go right around 2 to 2.5. And then to compensate for that drive, to prevent the bus from clipping, I'll usually pull the output down a dB or so. Now, again, that's all going to depend on, the audio that's being routed to that bus. As a mixer, I get a lot of sessions without any headroom at all. So, pulling that output down is something that's pretty much necessary to compensate for the drive. Now, since this is the first bus, we're going to go ahead and leave this VCA group assignment of group 1 alone. Now, the really cool thing that Waves did was they didn't just emulate the console, but they emulated every single channel. So if you go up here to load like a preset, since we're working on the Spike, we'll select Spike, you can see they have a model of every single channel of the console. Now, there's subtle differences that I doubt 90% of most people could tell, but, I just kind of randomly go through and pick and choose whatever, number I feel like. I guess there's really no, specific, oh, you should use channel 7 for a vocal, whatever. It's probably not really that much of a difference. Okay, so now that this is done, let's go ahead and hold down Option, and we're going to drag this NLS channel to our music bus. Now that it's on our music bus, let's open it up. The first thing we're going to do is change the VCA group assignment to group 2. And then, since this is a music bus, these files tend to come in a little bit hotter. So let's go ahead and pull this down just a little bit. Now again, all of this drive, settings and balancing your outputs is something you'll do in mix. I'm just trying to dial in a little bit of a setting that you can work with in the beginning. And then from there, you can figure out what's best for your song. But I went ahead and pulled this down a little bit. And then let's go ahead and just choose another random channel for it. Okay. Now, let's do the same thing to the effects. Holding down Option, dragging it down. Now open it up, and let's assign it to VCA Group 3. Now, since this is the effects bus, these signals are generally not as hot as, your vocal bus would be or your music bus. So I'll tend to drive a little hotter than I would with the, audio buses. Plus, the cool thing about that is the drive is what really adds the color and the hardware and console coloration to the audio. So I find that by driving a little bit more on the effects bus, it kind of makes an emulation that my reverbs and delays are coming from hardware units. It just adds that hardware color, which makes it feel like I'm using a lexicon or another piece of external gear. So just pushing the drive adds that hardware color to it. So, just depending again on, what kind of signal you're getting will depend on how much you could drive it and how much you may have to compensate. Now, unless you're using a crap ton of reverb, you should have plenty of room. Okay. So now lastly, we'll go ahead and just assign this another channel. And we're done with the buses. Okay, so now moving on, we'll go ahead down and start applying some reverbs and some effects. For my vocals reverb, I love to use a plugin by a company called Overloud, which is Reverb. It does not get the recognition that it should. I think this is an incredible reverb. Now, for vocals, this is one of those things that everybody has their favorites, and I do not stick to just one reverb. Again, it's one of those things that every mix is different. But, the Reverb is incredible. The IR1 is incredible. Altiverb is amazing. You just have to play around. But as a default, I generally will reach for Reverb or Reverb. And inside of Reverb, there's a really cool room setting that I like. I'll show you here. Male Vocal Room Z. Now, I'll usually pull the time down to just under 1 second. Now, here's one quick thing that I'm going to say, but I'm going to really save this for a future tutorial. You should time all of your reverb decays, all of your delays, and all of your compressor release settings to the tempo of your song. That will just allow for a much tighter mix. You will be amazed at how much tighter your mixes sound when all of your reverbs, delays, and compressors are decaying and releasing to the tempo of the song. Now, one quick Google search will find you a chart that will convert BPMs to milliseconds based off of certain note values. So, at 155 BPMs, it'll tell you what the, what a quarter note value is in milliseconds, what a half note value is, what a whole bar is, what 2 bars is, what a 16th note is. So you can dial in those settings if you want your reverb to last, 1 whole bar. You can look at that chart, find your BPM, and it'll show you what the setting should be in milliseconds. So really cool. And I will have a future tutorial on that, I promise. But for now, I'm just dialing in a random setting since clearly this is a template and I don't know what the tempo of the song is going to be yet. So I'm just kind of pulling that down a little bit to start. Also, generally speaking, I'm not really going to play with this EQ that comes in it much. It's just, again, one of those things that I find best for waiting until I get into the mix to play with. Okay, now on to Vox Delay. This is something where I'm kind of giving away a little bit of a secret. My absolute favorite delay is made by Sound Toys, and it's called Echo Boy. And there's a setting in here that I use that I tweak. Obviously, I'm not a preset lover. I, find certain presets, especially on effects. Those are obviously a little bit different than compressors and EQs. Effects presets are okay, but still, I like to, tweak things to fit my song. But under the vocal effects setting, the Popstar Radio Echo is such a cool a cool delay. It's got an 1/8 note and a quarter note, and it's got this cool transmitter telephone style saturation to it that's really cool. And then I just tweak it to my liking. Sometimes I'll change it from 1/8 and quarter to an 1/8 and a 16th. Just depends. And of course, I'll dial in the high cut and low cut settings to taste. But again, it's all up to your own creative devices. But this is my absolute favorite delay for vocals. Okay, now on to a plate. For plate reverb, I'll usually either default to the Reverb, to the IR1, or to the Reverb. Generally, it's the Reverb. There are some really cool plates that come in here, but I find that the small dark plate or the medium dark plate works for most things that I use. Since I don't know what my session really is going to be yet, I'm going to go ahead and set it on the medium setting. and I will come back and dial in all of these settings to taste. Again, I'm just kind of throwing some basic presets in here just to give me a place to start from. Once I get into my session and I hear how it sounds on the song, I'll come back in and I'll start dialing in. Clearly, you know, every song is different, so you can't just sit here and expect to dial in a setting a month before you ever heard the song and expect to be able to apply it and it just work. It's just not like that. Now for the hall, I'll usually go for the Reverb again. Reverb has some incredible hall settings. I absolutely love them. The acapella vocals is one of my absolute favorites. It's really big, really long, so I usually kind of turn it down to about 2 seconds. Now for the room, this is going to freak some people out, but honestly, the Reverb, the Room 2, it's not great, but you know what? It's in hip-hop, I've just grown to like it on stuff. I don't know. It's one of those things that it's so ugly that it has character. I don't know. It's weird, but you know, I like other reverbs, obviously. The CSR stuff is great. You know, my lexicon emulations are great. My external lexicon is great. You know, but the Reverb is just kind of one of those things that I grab and I end up leaving. So, you know, it is what it is. You don't have to like it. For now, I'm going to leave the chamber empty because I don't feel like dialing that in. That's usually one that I won't even set a preset on. I just kind of have an aux track for it in case I use it. You could see I don't even have it routed in. I just usually have a space for it, and then if I decide to use it in the mix, I'll go ahead and apply a plugin. Now for the quarter and eighth note delays, I'll usually start off, these are just basic delays, using the Digistock delay. Whoops, sorry. My mouse is a little sensitive. I go for the extra long delay, and since this is the quarter note, set them both on quarter, and usually feedback around 20-25% to start. Now obviously these are stereo delays, so you can change each side. You can have one side be a quarter, one side be a 16th. You know, I mean, it's entirely up to you. You can change the feedback and the mix percentage of each side, as well as obviously the delay. You know, again, entirely up to you. I just usually leave them stock, both sides equal, you know, to start off, and then I'll, you know, start messing with stuff once I get into the mix. Since we're going to use the same delay on the eighth note, we're just changing the value. You can go ahead and hold down Option, drag that onto your eighth note delay track, bring it up, and then just change the note value. So there. Now you can go ahead and close out. Now, I have a parallel compression bus in here. Now that's something that you guys might not be familiar with, and I am going to do a tutorial in the very near future, on parallel compression. That is something that I think everybody needs to learn and understand. I will go ahead and just throw on my kind of default parallel compressor, which is the CLA 76 by Waves. It's an 1176 emulation. I have the hardware, so believe me when I could say that this is an incredible compressor. Now for parallel, especially on hip-hop, I love setting the all buttons in setting. I do it on my hardware. I set the release pretty damn fast, and I'll usually set my attack, you know, medium slow, you know, usually somewhere around 3.2. And then I'll turn down my input for now because it's going to slam as soon as it starts getting signal. And I'll bring my output down too because generally speaking this will clip right off the bat. Okay. Now for chorus, I'll go ahead and I will use the AIR chorus. Just basic. Mic DSP has a great chorus too. But, you know, again, it's just one of those things I throw on a default and I mess with it later. You know, just being able to hear some settings and, you know, dial some things in is all we're trying to do here. Now, lastly, well, second to last actually, because we're going to go ahead and might as well throw our click track on the clock real quick. Plug in, instrument, click. I like the Rhythm Watch quarter and eighth. Okay, now we'll go ahead and do our 2-bus. As a matter of fact, for this particular session template, I'm going to apply my bus processing to the master fader, not to the 2-bus. Again, do it how you like, but generally speaking, I'll do it to the master. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to input the NLS bus. And I'll go under harmonic. And this is part of the NLS console emulations that we did on our actual bus tracks. Now, a lot of people will apply the NLS channel to every individual channel and then use this bus on either their group buses or on their master. I find that it's kind of unneeded to saturate every single channel, especially since I use with hardware, and some of the sessions I get were recorded through consoles. So I find adding that to every channel is just a little over the top. So I just throw the channel plugin on my buses, and then I throw the bus plugin on my master. But again, you could do it however you like. So I grab the NLS bus first. We're going to set it obviously on spike. We're just going to drive it about 1, maybe 1.5. Okay, so now you can see here in the VCA groups console, you can adjust each one of those groups that we assigned before. So we have groups 1, 2, and 3, vocals, music, and the effects. You can adjust those right here. You can add more drive, you can pull down the outputs. You could do whatever you like. So, it's, a really cool feature to have inside of this bus plugin. So, pretty cool. But again, we're just coloring our master a little bit here. I won't usually adjust the trim unless I find that I need to. Most of the time, as I'm balancing out my mix, I should, generally speaking, have more than enough headroom to allow for that drive. Okay. Now, the very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply, excuse me again, the Mic DSP Analog Channel 1. Another good console emulation with a little bit of compression. I generally like to use consoles 1, 2, or 3. Just depends on the song, but for now I'm going to use console 1. I'm going to drive it, again, just about 1 dB. I'm going to leave the output alone, and I'm going to turn the compression down to 4.5. Generally speaking, when it comes to the compressor on the analog channel 1, I only want it reducing gain about 1 dB at a max. This is not my master bus compressor. Again, this is just for coloration. So this is just, I just want it touching the peaks a little bit. So change your meter to gain reduction, and as you start playing your track through, make sure you're not really hitting more than 1.5 dB of compression. That's all you need for this. Okay, so next thing on the list is the Waves S1. I have another actual, stereo widening tool, an imaging tool that I use more, which is made by a company called Dewey. Where is it? If I can find it. What the heck here? Sorry, guys. Here it is. Sorry. The Dewey Wide. I'll just show it to you really quick. It's cool because it has this little frequency boost on it, really awesome. I generally like this better than the S1 sometimes on my master. It's, again, up to taste, but a lot of people don't have the Dewey plugins, so I'll use the S1 for this example. Now, as far as width goes, I try to stay away from pushing it too much. You just want to, push it a little bit out past the speakers. You're not going for a whole lot. Leave that up to mastering, if it needs done. But, just to take your mix and give it that bigger, more analog kind of feel, I just push it up to, 10%, 14% max. When I first started using this plugin, I loved it, and I used to push it up to like 1.3, 1.4. Then I'd run into phase issues, and I'd be freaking out. So, just set it, low, and if you have to do it more in mastering, you will. Okay. So the very next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my master bus compressor. And now for this, I always make sure I select multi-mono, because I want it to process the left and right channels independently, the same as an actual hardware stereo bus compressor would. For other buses, you could choose whether you want it to process in stereo, processing both channels simultaneously and equally, or if you want them to process independently, entirely up to you. But I like, on my master fader especially, to process my master bus compressor as a multi-mono. And I use the SSL comp. It's been referred to as the record button for a reason. Now, the CLA plugin is probably as much a definitive example of the record button as you could possibly get. These settings on this preset are generally perfect. This is one of the compressors that I actually usually never touch except for the threshold and the makeup gain, obviously. The attack and release settings are the way that I usually keep them, and then I just adjust the threshold and the makeup gain. Generally speaking, for a master, I don't like to get more than 4 dB of gain reduction. But, I mix into this, so, you'll find that when you mix into your master bus compressor, you're applying less compression to the individual tracks in your session. So go ahead and apply that. And again, we'll dial in those settings as we get into each track. Now, the last thing I'll do is I will apply some tape emulation. For that, I use the Waves Kramer tape. And I use the setting, Mastering Clean and Open. I'll just turn down the noise. It's pretty much non-existent for now. And a lot of times, honestly, I might bypass this on my template, and then I'll bring it into the mix if I feel like I need it. It's just one of those things that colors the mix a little bit more, so you can kind of decide if you need it. Like I said, on a lot of my templates, I have it there, but it's bypassed. Okay, so as far as the audio tracks go, I don't send any reverbs or delays or apply any compression to them. As I said, I leave everything dry. If an artist wants me to, apply some, reverb to their vocals as they're performing, I will. Again, it's all entirely up to what the artist wants, but I try never, again, to put any compression or anything on the vocal until after it's recorded. So here we go. We have our session template. So let's go ahead and just save this really quick. Apple S or File Save. Now I'm going to close this session. I'm going to create a new session. 24 or 48, it's fine. This is not really anything that we need to worry about. I don't need to worry about it for now because I'm just kind of giving you an example. You just use my Hip Hop IO, click OK. I'm going to set it on the desktop, which is a demo. Click Save. Here it is. Now let's go ahead and import our session data as if this were a new recording project. File, Import, Session Data. Now I have the quick trick of finding exactly where I have my session template saved. I think it's in here. Yes, there it is. Okay. See, here you go. Everything that we've done. Now say this is a mix session, not a recording session. I just want to import the effects tracks and my group buses and my master. You don't have to import everything. You can select which tracks you want to import. Say you don't want to import the chorus. You want to not use a chorus on this one. That's fine. You don't want to use parallel compression, whatever. You can select which tracks you import and which ones you don't. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't need the clock since this isn't a recording project. I'm going to take the master, the two bus, the chorus, parallel comp, and the rest of these delays and compressors, as well as my group buses. And there we go. We're not going to be importing the tempo or key signatures. We're not going to be importing window configurations or memory locations. Everything here is the way it is. We don't have any audio to worry about, so we don't need to worry about sample rate conversion. So let's go ahead and click OK. Now Pro Tools is loading it, and boom, there you go. Here's everything that we just did. All of the routing is set. All of our plugins are there. And as you can see, all of our settings are there. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Just the way we wanted it. So there you go, and there you have it. I believe that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to cover today. Now, I am going to throw this out there really quick. Here in the very near future, I am going to upload all of my favorite plugin settings for hip-hop. Now, whether you have the plugins I have or not, that's going to be up to, you, obviously. But I am going to be using a lot of the Waves and MicDSP stuff. I will try and create plugin presets for all of the Digistock plugins as well. So that way, the guys who are working with, the stuff that comes with Pro Tools will at least have something to start with. As always, don't rely on presets for dynamics. Effects are one thing, but please don't do it when it comes to dynamic stuff. I will be creating my presets for everything, and I will get those uploaded ASAP. As I said, I have some other tutorials that I've been working on. I try and get this done as much as I can. My schedule is incredibly overwhelmed right now, so it's hard to get everything done and set the time aside to record these and get them up. But I'm trying. The DVD series is coming along. The book is coming along. So that's positive. But I'm working on mixing like 4 records right now, and I've got like 2 more on the horizon I've got to get done. So things are definitely busy. But I hope this answered your questions. I'm pretty sure that was everything that was asked. I can't remember if I mentioned anything else, but if I left something out, please let me know. I'll post another video response if I have to, or I will email you back the steps on how to accomplish what it is you're going after, whatever the case may be. Okay, everybody, I thank you for stopping by. As always, please subscribe. Please tell your friends. Send everybody here. If you like what I, have shared with you, please, post a comment, say what's up. Click the little like down there. If you don't like it, then you don't have to watch it. I do this to try and help people out and to try and give back. God knows when I was starting out, I wish there was a YouTube. There wasn't, so I had to spend hours upon hours learning this stuff on my own, reading books, internships, working in studios, all of that. So it's a great thing for you guys who are just starting out now to have it, access to all of this stuff on the internet. It's amazing, and I just hope that I can contribute to that. So again, thank you guys so much. My email is in the description below, so you can contact me with questions. Again, I'm booking projects all the time, so if you'd like to talk to me about booking a mix project or whatever, or a recording project, feel free to send me an email, and I hope this has helped you guys out and answered your questions. Take care, everybody.